Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to be reading a story called I Am Harriet Tubman. And after we read this story, you will do one final book review on this book. I Am Harriet Tubman. Do you know what the North Star is? It's one of the brightest stars in the sky. Unlike other stars, which may seem to move, the North Star always stays where it is. When you find it, I'll show you which way is north. Back when I was growing up, in certain parts of the country, if you were black, you were most likely enslaved. We didn't have a choice. Being enslaved meant we were forced to work without pay. We were treated terribly. We lived in tiny shacks with no windows. We slept on the floor or in boxes filled with straw. As kids, we had to wear sacks, and they certainly didn't celebrate our birthdays or keep records of when we were born. Worst of all, being enslaved meant we were property, no different from a horse or a piece of furniture. That meant my family, my mom and dad included, was owned by someone else. They could sell us. And they did. Slaves were supposed to do whatever our owners told us to do. The next time they came through, my mother was ready. Someone wanted to buy my younger brother. She had asked other slaves to help her hide my brother in the woods for nearly a month. But eventually, they found him. It was a powerful moment. My mother standing up to those men. Was it dangerous? Definitely. But was it right? But it was right. After that, they didn't sell my brother. As early as I can remember, I loved listening to my mother tell stories. She taught me some of life's most important lessons. Being enslaved, it was against the law for us to read and write, but she told me stories from the Bible, including the tale of Moses. He was the leader of the Israelites. He led them out of slavery to freedom. Freedom from slavery? I like this story. When I was around 6 years old, it was my turn to start working. I still lived with my family, but my owners hired me out to another farm. What would happen if we didn't do what they said? Our owners would whip us, or worse. I know it's scary, but by hearing my story, I hope you'll find strength you never knew you had. That's what happened when I was around 7 years old. I was working in my owner's house and went to grab a lump of sugar from a nearby bowl. She reached for something to hit me with, and I ran as fast as I could. When I got to someone else's farm, I hid in their pig pen. That's how scared I was. For 5 days, I stayed there, hiding in the mud, fighting the pigs for potato peelings and scraps of food. Eventually, I was starving and came back. When I did, they beat me. But now, people started to realize I wasn't afraid to protect myself. By the time I was 12, I was working outdoors every day where the hardest work was done. I hoed, harvested, and lifted heavy barrels of flour. I got so strong, I was chopping so much wood, even the men could barely keep up. Working in the fields gave me more than physical strength. It gave me time to learn from other enslaved people, time to consider new ideas. During that time, I spent many nights looking at the sky. My father was the one who taught me about the North Star. Since slavery was so terrible, you may be wondering why we didn't all run away. It was nearly impossible. One night, while we were doing errands at a nearby store, I saw an enslaved man who had left his farm without permission. I could have stopped that man from running, but I refused to. Enraged, a supervisor from the farm picked up a heavy weight, aiming for the slave. It hit me instead. I got knocked out. It was an injury that forever changed my life. Since I didn't die, I decided God had a plan for me, and I was guiding and protecting me. After my injury, I started having vivid dreams. I'd be flying like a bird over fields and towns, over rivers and mountains. In the air, I'd reach a great fence, and on the other side would be a big, beautiful field. But each time, no matter how hard I tried, I could never get over that line. When I was around 22, I got married and got rid of my childhood name. Now I was Harriet Tubman. Soon after, I found out I was about to be sold. Someone else who could take me from my family and hurt me? I knew there was only one choice. I must escape. My brothers and I planned to escape, but they got scared and turned back. So I went all by myself. I traveled by night, following the North Star, just like my father had taught me. I stayed in houses of people who wanted to help us find freedom. I was now traveling on what was called the Underground Railroad. It wasn't a real railroad. It didn't have tracks or train cars, and it didn't go underground. It was people who didn't like slavery secretly helping people escaping from slavery. But it did have special stations. Safe hiding places run by black and white helpers were called conductors. It even had its own signals. On the Underground Railroad, we were safe. Eventually, I made it to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Slavery was illegal there. I was free now, no longer enslaved. That's it. Here it said she had a regular job cooking and cleaning and a regular place to live. She could have stayed there forever. But then she got news of where she used to live in Maryland. It says, one of your nieces and her family, they're about to be sold to a new owner. What should we do? The answer was obvious. I need to go back to help them escape too. And that's exactly what I did. A year after I escaped, I snuck back into Maryland. Thanks to my own trip on the Underground Railroad, I knew people who would help us. No question, it wasn't safe, but it was right. In a daring escape, we snuck my niece and her family to the closest city, Baltimore, Maryland. Then, out of state to Philadelphia. They were the first people I rescued, but certainly not the last. On my next trip back to Maryland, I helped free my youngest brother, whose name was Moses, as well as 2 other men. On the Underground Railroad, we used hiding places like attics and potato cellars and barns. Some folks even built secret tunnels and hidden rooms like this fake closet. I also continued wearing disguises. With each trip, our Underground Railroad helped more slaves escape. Soon, they started calling me Moses of my people. To stay out of sight, I traveled by night, sticking to the back roads. I also made many of my trips in the winter when people wouldn't be outside their homes. Occasionally, it was so hard to walk over mountain passes. Even the bigger and supposedly stronger men would want to stop. I always kept them going, leading the way. On this particular night, we ran out of money, but I was so committed to keeping everyone safe that I gave away some of my own clothing, including my underwear, to pay for the place where we slept. On another trip to buy some live chickens, I spotted one of my old masters, someone I used to work for when I was enslaved. As he came near me, I pulled a string around a chicken's leg and made them flap and scream. He was so distracted by the noise, he never realized that he was this close to catching me. Over 11 years, I went back to Maryland 13 times, personally freeing around 70 people. To keep them safe, I led many of them to Canada, which is where I brought my 5 siblings, my niece, and even my own parents. My family had been separated for nearly 7 years. The more I fought against slavery, the more I realized that the only way to win was to end slavery itself. That chance came as the Civil War began. The northern part of the country wants to stop slavery. The South wants to keep it. At first, I took care of wounded soldiers, but soon my best talents were put to use. This is Secretary of War Edward Stanton. Look at this information she has collected. Harriet Tubman and her spy ring are remarkable. Soon after, I became the first American woman ever to lead an armed raid into enemy territory. With the information we found, we successfully fought the Southern soldiers. Most important, we proved that black people could serve in the military just as well as white people. As a master spy for the North, I led groups of scouts into South Carolina to scope out what the other side was doing. Eventually, the North won the Civil War and slavery ended. But that didn't mean the battles were over. I became a community activist, then traveled around the country talking about injustice. After the war, I was so poor I had to burn pieces of my fence for firewood. But, as always, I kept battling and helping those who needed it. When I was nearly 90 years old, my dream of helping others grew even bigger as I established a new home in Auburn, New York for poor and old and sick African Americans. In my life, I was told I couldn't make my own choices, told I would never escape. But I did. I fought for my independence, and once I had breathed the air of freedom, I knew I needed to help others breathe it too. The measure of success isn't what you achieve for yourself, it's what you do for others. Think of yourself as a bird. Some days you'll climb high. Some days you'll fall. But when you pass the clouds and reach the top, you have a choice. You can stay up there and enjoy the view, or you can go back down and bring others up to join you. In every life, we face hard decisions. At those times, we can make the safe choice or the right choice. Would you put yourself at risk to help someone else? Would you stand up to someone mighty in order to help someone who is weak? To answer those questions, you must follow your heart, your own North Star. It will always point you in the right direction. I am Harriet Tubman. Follow me. I will lead the way to freedom. And here just shows her timeline of her life. So around 1822, she was born. And then it shows different trips that she's taken. And March 10th, 1913, she dies in Auburn, New York. And on April 20th in 2016, they have her statue here. And it says, the U.S. Treasury announces future $20 bill with Harriet's face on the front. And that's the end. So now your job is to go on to Seesaw and click Add Response, and you will complete the book review for this book.